Hi, I'm Jubilin Velasco and I'm the owner of Everest BPO that provides outsourcing service. This video is for those UK business owners that is looking to build an offshore team here in the Philippines. We're going to help you to get to know more about the Philippines in terms of providing BPO service. I have Chris McIntosh from the United Kingdom who's now residing here in the Philippines. He is working as a Chief Operating Officer at CCU that provides offshore and onshore outsourcing service. What can you say about the culture gap between the United Kingdom and the Philippines?
When people in the UK are looking for outsourcers, they're not actually looking for, oh, are we a good cultural fit? They're looking for looking for good quality. They're looking for great service. They're looking for reliability, and they're also looking for price. Okay, and that's what we really need to kind of get across. Yes, we need to understand there have been reasons in the past. There's like a culture trend that's moved in the industry because, go back nearly 30 years. I've been in the business close on 30 years. And you go back 30 years, our option at that time was 100% India. Okay. And then what was happening was India was, this is the consumer market mainly, right? Because that's that's what India kind of represented, and what the contact center is, as it's called now. In my day, it was called call center. Now it's contact center because we got omni multi-channel sort of processes, and in my day, the only way that you could contact or have consumers contact you, or you contact consumers, was purely by call. So yeah, you go back almost 30 years. India was primarily the hub, for contact call centers. Then South Africa came into it, but South Africa was mainly dealing with its own sort of domestic markets and Pan-African markets, because South Africa primarily was, first kind of language other than its cultural language was English. Plus, South Africa only being kind of 1 hour's time difference, it was kind of seen as a competitive advantage.
What is the story behind your passion working with Filipino people or working here in the Philippines? How did you came up and the setup?
For Filipino contact call centers, let's just keep it as contact centers, yeah. But when I'm talking the original days of call center that became contact center, right? So from a contact center perspective, the UK market was probably not as attractive to the Filipino end, because if you look at 24-hour servicing, the natural fit for Filipinos or for Filipino businesses or centers was Australia and the US, because you've got that full 24-hour cycle of time, when you run two shifts in a day. Because by the time your Australian shifts are logging off, there's a gap, and then the American shifts start to log in, and they run all the way through to the Australian shifts then start. So that was kind of how the development grew. And it wasn't until the UK compliance started to get steeper that people started to look outside of India and outside of South Africa from a voice quality perspective. And that's where the Philippines became, in their own right, because, I don't think anybody in the world could kind of argue that Filipino voice and value for money is the best. We try new places. Excuse me. We try new countries. I mean, people are now trying Africa. They're trying places like Kenya and Ghana. But the voice quality, even though they are brought up on sort of, understanding how to speak English, the voice quality is still not has the same clarity, and also the control. It's not just how you speak, but it's how you control. The Filipinos are fantastic, with customer service. They talk at a nice pace. They talk with ease. They make the customer feel comfortable. Whereas UK people are very kind of impatient. So if you've got a very strong Indian accent, or when I say a South African accent, it may not be, what I don't kind of mean is, the sort of English side of South African, because even their accents are very strong. Because when you look at the different cultures across the three main areas of South Africa, their actual voice content is still very, very strong, and they talk very quick. And it depends on where they are. In, say, Durban, it's there's a major split between India and KwaZulu, and the mixture of those accents are very kind of thick and strong. And therefore people from the UK, they get impatient if they're not understanding, or they're not they're having to really listen hard. They get impatient, and that's again where the Filipinos have the edge, because they talk at a nice pace. They sound like they care. They sound like they understand. Look, I'm not saying it's 100% fantastic, but it's the highest I've seen, and I've been in the industry a long time. Hence the reason why I decided to kind of base myself here. The culture is changing. So many Filipinos now are in the UK. They work there in the healthcare. I mean, you take that. What do I mean by they work there in the healthcare? They as nurses, so that kind of adds value to the caring, and also the UK culture is kind of becoming more acceptable to the fact that Filipinos are caring people, and and they do wonders. They do wonders in the healthcare, and again, I think that's kind of opening the eyes up to the fact that Filipinos are generally good people, and caring, and have a good rapport.
Can you tell us about a specific culture of United Kingdom in terms of dealing with business?
If you look at the UK, very multicultural now. It's very multicultural now. There's a lot of Eastern Europeans, Afro Caribbeans, that came over a long time ago to the UK, and it's kind of developed. I mean, our own Prime Minister is now. I think he's actually Indian Kenyan. I think from heritage. So,
What do you think is the criteria of UK client in getting center partner to work with them?
what companies are looking for now is good quality, good compliance, good service. They want to make sure that their customers are being treated properly. They're treated well. Their customers feel like they've had 5-star treatment. Culture, because it's not just culture, it's nature. Let's call it nature. The nature of the Filipino. So, and that's why I think it works. It works well, and it's for years, years and years. Yes, you've been dealing with the Americans, and they're tough. They're a tougher audience. They're very they expect value for money. I was going to say fussy, but that's kind of a where it kind of sits, and they've got every right to be like that, because if you're paying for a service, you expect a service, and that's why they're demanding. And then you look at the Australian market, which again, the Philippines has been serving Australia a long time, and you know, they're very brash. They don't suffer fools. I mean, I've tried for many years to dial Australia from India, and it's been very, very painful. It's been a very painful experience. And you know, I felt for my agents so much because you know they were rude to them. They were hanging the phone a lot. And the same with the Americans. You know, we were trying to, but not so bad. I think you know what is nice is the Americans would kind of listen to a degree, but I think they generally both countries, are both warmed very nicely to the Philippines, and more as we've gone on. Certainly in the last 15 plus years, the UK market is moving more towards the Philippines. And when you think about it, why have they not moved sooner? It's because it's been an untapped market for the UK. Because Philippines, as I said right at the beginning, the Philippines didn't go to the UK to attract the business, because for them, Australian works because of time zone, and American works because of time zone. That gives them the 24-hour cycle. Obviously UK kind of fits in between, so it comes in it comes in kind of more towards the end of the Australian shift, but then floats 3 to 4 hours into the American shift. So it's so when you're looking at kind of 24-hour cycles, and you've got so many seats as a BPO, you want to be able to have people log off, and then a couple of hours later a fresh shift coming in, logging in, so you're getting your value back on your seat effectively.
Can you tell us your experience working in other center aside from Philippines, like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, those country that also providing BPO service? How was your experience working with them?
When did I start working in the Philippines? I started 18 years ago, or about 18 years ago. I was running a BPO company from the UK, and I've been running this company for by this stage for around 2.5, 3 years. And we were focusing on our call center network was in India. We did trial South Africa, but it wasn't very successful for us at the time, because again there was some differences in terms of the quality aspects and also the pricing aspects. So as you can imagine, India was very cheap, and that shouldn't have been the whole reason why we would use India. So, and also at that point, compliance started to matter in the UK. We were getting a lot of abandonment in our calls, coming out of India. Plus, we were working with multiple centres. So, and the problem was that when you're trying to look at quality, and it's coming from different centres, then obviously the levels of performance are different, the levels of quality are different, and that wasn't kind of working for us. Also, the British public, something called the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office, was launched, and they started to kind of police compliance in the UK. And what we wanted was to look for a change. And I was working also previous to that with an organisation that had derived from India, and had launched into the Philippines. So I was talking to friends, and they were in the Philippines, and I decided to come and visit, the centres. And once I did, I never looked back. I came and had a look. the one thing at the time was obviously the price scale between the Philippines and India is obviously slightly more expensive here. But when you start to look at, justifying expense, you have to also look at quality and compliance. And what I found was that that's where the Filipinos started to make the difference, because the UK audience would listen more. You need to, in order to do the job, you need to start your call at one point and finish it at the end point. And a lot of the calls were being abandoned in the opening seconds, because unfortunately the Indian centres were not able to reach out and connect properly with the UK consumer. So 18 years ago, I did my first trial, and it worked. And then we found that, although it was slightly more expensive, it was well worth the cost. It was well worth the extra cost in terms of the quality. Plus, it started to, open everybody's eyes up, and then I learned that actually, because this was a lead generation survey process that I was doing at the time, and then we needed to kind of develop our core range of products and service offering, and I learned at that point that there was more talent, more strings to the Filipino bow, and that's when I started, moving in campaigns like telemarketing, even attempted selling upgrades, which was never done before. So and found that to be very, very successful. And the one thing I was in places like the Middle East, and UAE and GCC, your population in those countries are mainly first and highest population is what we call kind of Southeast Indian Asian. So that could be Indian, Pakistani, Nepali, Bangladeshi, Sri Lankan, and what they were trying to do was, in these countries, was service these markets, with these kind of populations that could only speak maybe one kind of language. So I try to encourage those countries to outsource to specific areas that could offer multi-language. And one of the big keys was the second highest population in those countries were Filipino. So I wanted to encourage them to outsource, because they were trying to service the Filipino market with mainly Arabic speaking, obviously through English, and it wasn't going tremendously well from a customer service perspective, certainly in terms of sales and upgrades, because there's this kind of mistrust. So pushing it here, was also, a big success, because obviously if a Filipino rings a call center about a problem, and they get to speak to a Filipino either in Tagalog or Visayas, or in English, because even still, they're talking to their own countrymen, and therefore there's a immediate kind of affinity and trust. So it works really well for those kind of countries. But getting back to the UK, because the level of English is so high and the quality of English is so high, it was working better for me at the time than my Indian operation. I still feel there's a big part for India, for certain kind of skills, but your main kind of dealing with consumers, dealing with problems, complaints, worked really well for me, from 18 years, and I haven't looked back.
You have been working here in the Philippines for 18 years now. Can you tell us about the cost effectiveness and the quality service that potential client may get if they're going to outsource their contact center in the Philippines?
Let's face it, talking commercially,
Yeah.
we on price are either on a par or slightly cheaper than South Africa. So therefore, what else do you need to look at? If your price is equal or slightly less, which more inclined it is slightly less at the moment than South Africa. What you then need to look at is what else do you get? And as I say, it's for me is no comparison. Voice quality, rapport building with clients, general kind of understanding nature, calm, clear. There's absolutely no comparison. When when I listen to you, you sound very clear. You sound very. I can hear, I can understand everything. Now, people are going to say, "Yeah, that's because you've been here 18 years." But trust me, it's not. It's the majority of the people here that actually do understand good English and speak good English. Sometimes, yeah, they don't kind of form all the words as accurately as somebody like myself who was born and bred in English. But does a South African, does an Indian, does a South American? No, it's more, as you say, neutral. I'm not saying everybody in call centers, but the majority. So you get a higher percentage here than you would in South Africa or other parts of Africa, and certainly in India, and certainly even in South America.
What can you say about the work ethics of Filipino? How service oriented they are?
I've had the opportunity to work in most countries across the world. If I can just list those countries, and then I'll talk about my my understanding and my experience really of work ethics. So I originally started out in India, then I had South Africa, then I used places like Thailand and then the Philippines, then and also South America. When I say South America, there were two main countries. The first one I operated out of was a place called British Guyana, and the second one was Bogota. And although they're both in South America, the kind of voice accent is completely different. In British Guyana, they sound very Caribbean. In Colombia, they sound very Hispanic. So, and I've also done some time in Kenya and Ghana, and parts of North Africa and West Africa, and of course, I've been extensively in the UAE and the GCC. So I know all about kind of work ethics, and what I love about the Filipino is that they are always good listeners. So they're very good to train because, and they're not afraid. When you go to certain countries and you say, right, when we're now going to be doing this campaign, and we start to train, and then you have to involve some kind of role play or a kind of recording piece so that we can play it back to them for their learning and understanding. Some countries they're too scared to actually go from a training perspective into a nesting perspective into a live perspective. What I love about the Filipinos is they're very, very, very brave. I've never had any problem taking them from a raw, I don't know anything about this campaign or product or anything, to a go live. They take the training, they absorb the training, and they thrive. They, in the main, when you think about the country and obviously the infrastructure, it's certainly in places like Manila, they would travel 2 hours to work, so there and back, 2 hours. So that's an extra 4 hours a day that they're traveling, and they're spending time traveling, to get to their work. And they show up here in the Philippines is their largest team, and this team mainly handles all the inbound customer service. And these guys are, they have attrition across the world, running into absenteeism, running into high sort of 8 to 12% and higher. Yeah. And here in the Philippines, it never really pushes more over 4%. And you think that's kind of good, and they're very dedicated, happy to log in, or happy to attend 30 minutes before the shift starts, so they can get a briefing, so they can get an understanding of the problems they're likely to face on the day. Always have a smile on their face. In fact, I had a client out from the UK, and he is a very experienced contact center operations person, and he's come out a few times in the last year. And one of the things he always says is he always leaves the country with the biggest smile on his face. He said, because everywhere you go, the smile on a Filipino, he said he's catching, even though he might be annoyed about something else, you can't help but, keep the smile. And he says it every time he comes. He said, he said it's the best country he visits, and he runs multiple sites, because obviously that's the kind of nature of his business. And but he always puts out the Philippines as his favorite site, purely because of the people, the friendliness, the fact that they can take criticism if they need to, and they always have this passion, for learning. And again, one of the number one places in the world. You may find it cheaper, but you won't get the quality. And I'm not talking about much cheaper either, because where we kind of fit in the market at the moment, I think it's good value for money.
You are well experienced working with Filipino and you seem to know a lot about us. What was the most challenging part for you working in the Philippines?
The challenging part is trying to compete, I suppose. Because there are some very, very good offerings here in the Philippines. So for me, the main challenging part again is the constant trying to keep up with my competitors, who are everybody, everyone from small kind of centers doing specific areas to the main kind of big companies like your TaskUs and your TPs and your group, right? So yeah, so yeah, I mean that's kind of my. I don't see it as a challenge. I don't look at managing the people as a challenge. I think that's probably the most easiest part of my time here. I don't look at where's the next talent coming from, because you know you, for me what works is I like to I like to take on fresh people and train them into my style, into my way, and that that is what I do, and I don't find that a challenge either. I when we hold interviews, so you know, we would get people on video call like this, and we would talk to them, and you know, and I'm always kind of happy because, you know, people are very confident and they talk good, and so it's very exciting. And obviously now that we kind of pushed away from the, you know, the restrictions of COVID, again, I found that kind of challenging. You know, during kind of 2020 to, you know, to early part of this year, I kind of found, you know, the COVID restrictions kind of challenging, purely because lockdown would mean that the transport would be shut at a time of night, and that put pressure on the agents, and that wasn't kind of right. So then the work from home aspect happened, and listen, we kind of all talk about, you know, work from home being a kind of new norm. It isn't, because I don't believe the Filipinos love that, because they miss coming to work, seeing their colleagues, having that kind of you know, peer contact. So, but that was a challenge for a while, and again, it didn't involve the people, it didn't involve the kind of culture of the mix between, say, country to country. It was just purely, you know, the COVID you know, situation.
What is your advice to your fellow business owners that is wanting to build an offshore team in the Philippines?
My advice is, I would look here at the Philippines seriously. Why? As I said, you're going to be paying you know, for an outsourced team, and you know, at the moment, you know, there is a view that if it can't be done in your country, where can it be done? I think the American culture has also looked at what they call nearshore, which is incoming countries like, you know, the Caribbean and Belize. But I do know from talking to a lot of American companies that they're kind of struggling, you know, within those areas, because nearshore just means there's a smallish amount of cost saving. Um, I think you know, obviously India has kind of lost a lot of perspective, but still remains a you know, an opportunity. Likewise, South Africa. I think South Africa is, you know, it's probably suffering now from the new generation of call center agents. That, you know, the voice piece is not as good as it was 20 plus years ago. And therefore, if you look at the biggest operator in South Africa, they've started to go into other areas of Africa. Why? Because they need alternatives to maintain their clients. So for me, I would say, you know, to any business out there looking to outsource, come here, come to the Philippines. If you want quality, if you want people that generally want to work hard for you, if you want people that sound good, yeah, and if you want value for money, come here. Come here. Have a look at it.
Thank you so much for sharing with us your wonderful experience, Chris. And I've learned a lot from you personally. And I hope you were able to provide more values in the BPO industry. So, do you have any social media or website where people can easily reach you out whenever they need some service from you?
I'm currently the Chief Operations Officer for an organization called CCU, which is Call Center Universe. My website is ccu.global. And you know, I'm a Brit first and foremost, but I haven't been home for a long time. I still have family and relatives at home. So, and I have a lot of clients that started with me a long time ago in the UK, still with me today. I've also got a lot of American clients and a lot of Australian clients, you know, working with me here today. Um, we do have other sites across the world, but our main proposition is here in the Philippines, and that's where I am. Not just because my family are here, because they've travelled with me as well over the years, and so yeah, happily, talk to me, on a separate situation as well. If you just want to, ask for some advice, if you just want to, seek some help in terms of how do you come here, and start in the Philippines? Who are the key players to either work with as well? Because I'm not suggesting that I'm your option, I'm your only option, but I'm generally somebody who considers himself, a very good kind of sounding block, really, for companies.